really happy to be here with Gill Paul, author, and we're looking at her new book, which is The Second Marriage, which is the story of Jackie Kennedy and Maria Callas. Now, I do have a copy of the book here. This is actually an American version, where it's going to have a different title, Jackie and Maria, but in England it is The Second Marriage, and that's what we'll be talking about. So you have been dealing with such iconic and striking people, and I think your first resort was to actually go and visit Scorpius, where Aristotle, who was one of the party, has his own island and much of the action takes place. What was your research trip like?
Oh my goodness, this is just the best bit of being an author, to be honest. There are lots of different locations in The Second Marriage, including New York and Hyannisport, Washington, Milan, but Scorpius was the place that I absolutely had to see. It's in the Ionian Islands, and I'd been to lots of other Greek islands. I'd never been to the Ionians before, and I hadn't realised how green they were. All the islands are covered in beautiful green forest, a mixture of trees and waters. I'm just gorgeous, absolutely lovely. We went in September, which is a very good time. You know, the heat is a bit calmer than it's been. But Scorpius is a private island owned now by a Russian billionaire's daughter, I think, who's doing it up as a resort for other billionaires. But when Onassis bought it in 1965, it had nothing on it. It didn't have water or electricity. He had to put everything in. He had to dredge a deep harbour for his yacht, the Christina. So I was determined to see it. We went to stay in Lefkada, which is the nearest inhabited island that you can stay in, and we rented a motorboat and drove out round it, and there was a bay where I could recognize from the description it was the place where they used to have lunch. It's got a little trattoria set up there, and we tried to zoom in there, and a security guard in a black uniform with a gun in his holster belt came out and very politely asked us to move off. So we went round again, and there was a little quiet bay with a tiny white building in it that I thought I recognised as a private beach that Jackie Kennedy used to use just for herself. And there was nobody around, so I dived off the boat and swam ashore just to say I had stood on Jackie Kennedy's beach. And I picked up a seashell and an acorn as my souvenirs and brought them back with me.
Yes, there was a collection of seashells in the chimney pot. That seemed to be very important, you know.
That was Maria's collection, yes.
Yeah.
And it was just, I mean, I would have loved to go ashore and climb up the hill to see the shrine, the little chapel where Aristotle's now buried with his son and daughter. Yeah. But I didn't think that the guard was going to let me do that. So, but what was important to me, lots of things. I mean, I'm a big swimmer. I love swimming, and I know Jackie did as well. So I was kind of calculating. I bet there were certain bays that would have been lovely to swim from one to the other. And I think it would have been possible to swim all the way around the island. It would have been a long swim, maybe stopping for rests. But if I was living there, I would definitely try it. So I kind of think she might have. Wow. But it was just that fun to kind of, you know, when you see the locations yourself in your mind's eye, you can hear what the sounds were like when you were sitting on the beach there.
Yeah.
Lovely.
It must have been really nice to kind of see the setting and where they were through your own eyes and through their eyes. So that must have been quite fun.
Oh, it's idyllic, absolutely idyllic, yeah.
Wonderful. So research is very big for you. I mean, I was really struck, you know, by the detail on his yacht, the Christina, the cigarettes that Jackie smokes. That's so detailed. Where do you start?
Well, I start by reading all the biographies of each of the characters, and then you find little rabbit holes. But it's not just the main sequence of events I'm looking for. I'm looking for these details like the cigarettes and the poodles' names and any tiny little things that can help to set the authenticity of the era, because I'm not going to hammer home that this is the 1960s and not the 2020s, but if you can just insert little bits and pieces every now and again, it subtly reminds the reader. So when I'm doing my research, I collect lots of little facts like that. I put sticky notes on the pages, and I mean, I won't insert them all. I'm not sort of trying to ram them in, but just every now and again, it feels like the story needs to remind you very subtly that this was the
I think it
1960s.
really does. So, you know, I felt
Thank
very
you.
transported back to mainly the 1960s, I think.
Yeah.
How hard did you find it to connect with these people who, you know, seem to be into power and style and, you know, a very different lifestyle, I guess, to most of us?
Well, I don't know if my version is the correct one, but I just keep reading all the biographies and any sources online and looking at photographs as well. They can be quite telling until you form an impression yourself. So, for example, with Maria Callas, she was vilified by the press and hounded by them, you know, by photographers chasing after her, trying to catch her scowling as if she's a prima donna, she's a difficult person. But one thing struck me when I was reading about her was that she had a really loyal friendship group. And that makes me start to like somebody when I read that.
Yes, yes.
And clearly she was perfectionist about her music. I mean, the other thing is that, and I know you love her music too, when you listen to her online, the voice is just transcendent. It's extraordinary. There are a lot of opera experts that still choose her as their favorite first soprano of all time. So that was another, if she was perfectionist when she went to work, then she was just being professional. And if it had been a man saying, can we please rehearse again? I'm not quite happy with it yet. Would people have called them difficult and a diva, or, you know? So I think there was a certain amount of sexism in that as well. And I really wanted to readdress that and look at Maria as a person who fell head over heels in love for the first and only time in her life when she got together with Aristotle Onassis.
What
So
is
that was one. When it came to Jackie Kennedy, you know, so much has been written about her, and so many people feel that they know her through all the portrayals in film and books and biographies and TV specials. But there were some questions that, to me, I really wanted to answer. Why did she put up with John F. Kennedy's womanizing?
Yeah.
Why did she marry Onassis? Was she just marrying for money? So I wanted to, you know, that's quite cold-hearted from our generation to look at somebody who just married him because he's the richest man in the world. So I wanted to kind of readdress that and find my own view of why she made those decisions.
I almost got a sense that, you know, because obviously she cradled Jack's head when he was shot, which must have been horrific. And then not long after, her brother-in-law gets assassinated too. And then, of course, you've got the Kennedy curse. But I just sort of thought she felt so fragile at that time that almost Aristotle Onassis had a way in, you know, he'd get in and rescue her somehow. But quite a bully in a way.
But, you know, there were several other men chasing after her in the years after JFK died, before she married Onassis, you know, perfectly eligible. And she had the architect David Warnocky. There was a diplomat, a British diplomat, in fact, Robin Ormsby Gore. And who did she choose out of all her suitors? The richest one.
I mean, I was writing my review and I was thinking how incestuous this all, you know, the whole setup feels, because, you know, there's Jackie's sister having a relationship with Aristotle, and also it's mooted that she had a relationship with Jack Kennedy, I guess, while Jackie and Jack were married, I think. You know, but it's just, it felt cloying. I felt quite sort of tense just reading about it.
Jackie and Lee had such a strange relationship. I mean, they were very close as children when they used to huddle together in bed as their parents were arguing in the next room, and they then got divorced. As teenagers, they were both passionate about clothes. They continued to be passionate about clothes, in fact. And Lee was several times voted the best dressed woman in the world. They loved foreign travel. They went to India together. They liked, you know, nice sunny beaches. But it's extraordinary to me that they didn't share, you know, more information about their private lives. So, for example, Lee had been having an affair with Onassis from, we think, 1962. She was married and he was with Maria, but it went on for quite some time after that. And Lee would have loved to marry him. She would have dropped her second husband like a shot if Onassis had offered her a ring on her finger, but he didn't. And then all of a sudden in 1968, he's seeing her sister, and Jackie didn't even call up Lee. You know, if I started dating one of my sister's exes, I would phone her first and say, hey, do you mind, by the way? You just would. But they didn't. Lee found out about it laterally. And in fact, when they were getting married, which was a real rush in October 1968, it was Onassis that phoned to tell her it wasn't Jackie, which I find most peculiar. And I think there was a real rift in their relationship after that. I think the rift had been introduced earlier in the 1960s when Jackie didn't approve of Lee having affairs during her second marriage to Stash Radziwiłł, the Polish prince in exile, because Jackie had directly intervened with the Vatican to get an annulment of Lee's first marriage to the British publisher Michael Canfield. So having done that, she kind of hoped that Lee would try and make this second marriage stick, and then she starts having affairs. So I think there were problems between the sisters at that stage, but I don't think their relationship ever recovered after 1968 when Jackie married the man that Lee had wanted to marry. Sounds like it was always a very competitive
Yes, he's like such a non-committer, and it's almost like you wonder if there's an unconscious drive there by Jackie to get one over on Lee. Who knows what the mental and unconscious drives and shenanigans were, but it seems quite hard on.
I think she was just in shock when she married Onassis. Yeah. She was Bobby Kennedy had been shot and killed in June, and she's quoted as saying, "They're killing Kennedys. My children are Kennedys." She just, how could she be safe? Yeah. I mean, there were several other factors going on. She was, at that time, dependent on the Kennedys giving her an allowance to top up Jack's government pension. And I don't think it was quite enough to keep up with her shopping habit, but also it had strings attached. So they expected to wheel her out to stand on podiums whenever any Kennedys wanted to be elected to office. And she really didn't, she was still terrified, but so I mean what we would now call PTSD, but they didn't in those days after Dallas. And so to stand on a podium beside her brother-in-law or anybody else standing for election must have felt utterly terrifying. So she wanted to get away from that. She was fed up, and she did tell friends that she was fed up with being America's grieving widow and stuck on this pedestal. So I mean that pedestal was toppled right overnight when she married Onassis. Her halo slipped big time.
Because of course he had nefarious dealings in America, so none of the Kennedys actually liked him. And then of course Tina, Aristotle's ex-wife, goes on to marry Niarchos, who is his arch
enemy. It's like a superhero at that point.
Unbelievable. I mean, unbelievable times amongst the rich and famous, I guess. So Thank you so much, Gill, for talking to us today about the background of the second marriage. It's absolutely fascinating stuff, and I really read it from cover to cover in 2 days because I enjoyed it. It's so readable. So thank you very much for joining us at TripFiction.
Thank you.